The Answer by Vernon Howard. Introduction. Throughout the known history of this world, it has very rarely occurred that a man has completely transcended both himself and the world, and left a written record to help point the way for others. The following correspondence from Vernon Howard is such a priceless rarity. These 5 very special letters were originally made available to students in the classes at Boulder City, Nevada, where Vernon Howard lived and taught for over 20 years. Not only were they valuable to the person receiving them, but Vernon Howard knew how valuable they could be to any sincere student. The letters are of a very lofty nature, and once understood, will provide you with a door to a much higher way to live your life. What is contained in the letters is timeless and can lead you to eternal life. A professional man corresponded with Vernon for a short time in the 1970s, asking questions about the spiritual path. Vernon's response to him is what follows. The truths contained in these pages can elevate you to an entirely new and different level of understanding. They are incredibly powerful and can take you to a place few human beings ever go. If you will allow it, these truths will literally help lift you to another world that your heart has always yearned for. Let them do that for you. Sincerely, Richard Wooldridge, Director, New Life Foundation. Letter 1. Dear, the mind can ask a question but cannot answer it. This is the real solution to the 3 questions you ask, plus every other question any human being has ever asked. Now, do not leave this point and be eager to go on to the next idea in this letter. Go right back and read the first principle supplied in the letter, which is, the mind can ask a question but cannot answer it. You have just been given a little exercise, which, if you were watchful, would have revealed a certain impatience and wrong eagerness on your part. Everyone is so eager to take a quick taste of everything on the menu that they never settle down to a full-course dinner. So we can now slow down and see what has been placed before us. The mind asks thousands of questions, has endless confusions, simply because it is its nature to be restless and agitated. It values the agitation because it can deceive itself into thinking that it is sincere, that it is doing something practical, that it is working for itself. But the deception of the ordinary mind is very easily exposed. Since it really does not want higher answers, it frantically and quite easily manufactures its own solutions to personal and social problems. The one thing the habitual mind cannot stand is to be without its invented and artificial answers, for the silence in the mind would reveal the artificiality of noisy and useless solutions. So look now at something very profound, which is this. The tricky mind invents questions and problems, not because it wants answers, but because it wants to supply its own delusions posing as answers. It now has a sure refuge for protecting itself from its own lies, which is to simply call its lies the truth. In short summary form, here is how it proceeds. 1. A lost and incomplete human being senses that something is wrong with his life. 2. Not understanding that his spiritual and psychological immaturity is his very problem, he asks his immaturity for help in relieving his pain and anxiety. 3. His immaturity is positively delighted to invent solutions to the problem, and these so-called solutions will be carefully contrived to point the blame away from immaturity. 4. Some of the tricky evasions his immature mind will use are to blame for others for his condition, to insist that painful confusion is necessary, to smilingly offer itself as the compassionate and true solution, to avoid situations where it may feel cornered, to describe itself as mature. 5. After a long time of perplexity and continued suffering, the person makes his first faint connection between his attempts to find answers and the nature of the answers he obtains. 6. The light finally dawns that he always gets an answer on the same low level of the question, and he sees that the question is indeed from the dungeon because it revolves around the person he calls himself, the very person who has been tormenting and deceiving him. 7. He next proceeds to perceive that when you throw trash into the wind, you must get trash in return, which is the same as saying if you ask ego-centered questions, you must get what you give, which will be ego-centered answers. 8. At this point, the individual is no longer the same person he was at point 1. That is, he now has a definite and accurate direction, which comes to him from a higher source than his habitual mind, which means he now has truth itself as his sure guide. Your letter, with its 3 questions, clearly indicates you want a certain wrong answer, which is based on a certain wrong question. By this I mean that you ask how to solve your problems of a craving for acceptance and also of losing your source of income and of going broke. You must try to see that your questions were based in misunderstanding, in spiritual sleep, just as I explained in the preceding 8 points. Let me now explain this just as clearly as possible once more, using different viewpoints. For one thing, you believe that you have dozens of problems and perplexities, and so you think that you can cure them one by one. This would take 1,000 years, and it would also take a lot of precious energy. Please do not unconsciously say that you already understand what I am going to say next. If you really understood these principles, you would have no questions to ask whatever. The only real problem you have is your insistence upon asking frantic questions. The very asking seems to give validity to the question, which is just another subtle and harmful trick being played on your unawake mind. If you did not ask the question, would you need an answer? Of course not. But the mind operates in the duality of question followed by answer. So if you are to justify giving to yourself the wrong self-centered answers you want, you must first invent a question. Remember what was said earlier in this letter, that the question from the dark dungeon can only supply a solution from the same dark dungeon, which our self-conceit carefully hides from us. Darkness would vanish without the steady stream of false question followed by false answer. So it fools you into calling the double delusion by noble names such as earnest seeking, thirst for knowledge, a spiritual quest, hoping for a higher life, seeking God. If you have a cup of impure water, it makes no sense to try to empty it with 1 spoonful at a time. Besides, in actual life, it will never be empty because the faucet you took it from is the impure source and can only give you more undrinkable water. What you can do is abandon completely that impure faucet, and when you have really done so, you will be led to the pure stream, which has always flowed outside your self-enclosed psychic house. But abandonment comes first. There is no other way. But the ego self wants the glory and applause of boasting to everyone, "See how noble I am. I am personally improving myself. I'm emptying the cup of impurities. And such a person really and foolishly believes that God and man are watching and admiring him. To use a figure of speech, God will admire only the abrupt emptying of the entire cup, but man will never admire this act, for he applauds only deceptive practices towards spirituality, such as appearing to be devout with mechanical religious rites. If you are wondering why I'm not answering your specific questions, I am. Still, there is nothing wrong with examining the specific question until seeing that it is simply one of the hundreds of dragons in the same dungeon. A money-worried mind cannot understand money. I don't mean it cannot understand ordinary cause and effect in which you get paid for performing a service. Nervous self-interest understands this quite clearly and tries to make the most of this business procedure. But a money-dominated mind cannot understand how to be free of its self-created torment, for it feeds on any kind of worry, including not only money, but poor health, loss of friendship, growing older, loneliness. So you must try to see at the start that nothing, absolutely nothing, can free you from your worry over money except another kind of mind. If you carelessly disregard what you have just read, you must pay the heavy penalty of trying to do the impossible. It is impossible for one dragon in the dungeon to comfort another dragon in the dungeon. This simply means that one thought cannot free another thought. The dragon trying to free another dragon is trapped in the same dark place, even though he may claim to live in the bright sunlight. Can you see something for the first time? Really, for the first time? Try. I will explain the same thing in several ways. You worry over money because you and your money are one. That is, the idea of a self, which is false, connects with an idea of money, which has no eternal value, and you think the loss of money is the same as the loss of you. Both the idea of you and the idea of money get all mixed up, and because money has certain earthly and temporary values, you think it also has values for you. Money has certain false rewards for false people, and since you still live from an artificial identity, you want the advantages of money, partly for earthly rewards, what it can buy, but primarily to convince yourself that you are real, which can never be done, for ideas about yourself are not yourself. Pay close attention to this until seeing it. You don't really worry over money. You worry over the possibility of losing your money, and therefore losing your previous illusions that you exist as you, that is, as a successful businessman, a respectable counsellor, a man who has it made. You do not fear losing your money. You fear losing a contrived sense of authority and stability. This means you are depending on something outside of truth to keep you unafraid. But this is the very cause of your fear. A free man cannot possibly worry over money or anything else, for he owns the entire universe by not caring whether or not he owns it. This means he is the entire universe. And when you are something, there is no separation and therefore no fear of loss. A truly self-unified person can engage in business, earn profits, take losses, double his income, have a large or small bank account, but all this is done simply because he is a human being living in a society which has created business, which includes him. But his life is elsewhere. He is like a lofty visitor from another planet who walks among the men and women of Earth and appears to be one of them. But he knows better, and so does God. Regarding your friends who envy you and ask for your advice, if you will stay wide awake with the following exercise, You will break harmful actions while involved. Go right ahead and give them practical advice, but notice where your vanity creeps in to build your sense of importance. Catch your love of feeling important, of feeling like the kindly older brother who helps a bewildered beginner. The very catching of a vanity-thrilled feeling begins to weaken its power to deceive you. Sincerely, Vernon.